Welcome one and welcome all to the most pointless show of them all. It is the NFC East Mixtape, I believe, volume 161. No, we do not know if we can do this on a consistent, regular basis anymore. We continue to ask every single day. We promise to find an answer at some point before the earth is disintegrated or whatever. I think I messed that up, but it should be at some point incinerated. Thank you very much. That is the beautiful baritone voice of Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation. I am RJ Ochoa from Blog on the Boys. We have a special guest in Jamual Forrest from the Trap or Dive podcast in Hogs Haven because BLG, we have an NFC East, NFC Championship game. And no offense to Jamual or any Washington Commanders fans, I think you and I, since the inception of the NFC East Mixtape, thought if this were ever going to happen, it was going to be between Philadelphia and Dallas.
I guess, but here we are in a much different scenario, really a fitting scenario for two of the best teams in the NFC this year, and exciting for the sake of this is the peak mixtape, right? Like you can't get any higher stakes than this in terms of a game between two of these teams. So excited to be here.
Jamual, just heads up, BLG hit me up after Philadelphia won on Sunday and said, do you want to do a mixtape, this week? And I'm here for the brand and I'm a company man. And so obviously to BLG's point, we had to do it because it's an NFC East title game. It's and a real one, not the weird regular season finales that the Cowboys played in for 3 years that they lost. So he hit me up and I was just, I also kind of thought that this is like the ultimate week for one of you, because one of you is going to win this game and be going to the Super Bowl and feel incredible. And the Cowboys are just floundering upon floundering. Like I'm just going to say in the opening minutes, I have never been down this bad. And I just wanted that qualifier out there for each of you.
Well, I love the fact that you are down this bad, honestly. And you know what's so crazy? Because I'll never forget, the first time I was on the mixtape, I had to take these jabs from both of you guys, and I was cool with that. I understand the state of the Washington Commanders football team, whatever they were at the time. I don't know what it was, but I love the state that the NFC East is in. And I think this is actually a point where like you actually mean it. It's not like about the division in the regular season anymore. Like it's a point where you're meeting each other in the playoffs and you're meeting each other for the biggest moment in the playoff, a chance for a Super Bowl bid. Like this is the ultimate bragging right. This is like where everything means everything for every single individual involved. And like to your point, RJ, what's so crazy is that for years, decades, literally, everybody thought that this was going to be a Dallas and Philadelphia thing for years to come, whenever it came around. But Dallas and Philadelphia thing, Washington, New York, bottom of the barrel, third, fourth place finishes. Only time Washington ever makes first place is if the other teams in the NFC sucks. You got to win 7 straight to make it to the playoffs. Now you get a 12-5 season where your team's actually good. That owner who shall not be named, he's gone. He's out the door. That man on a boat. Ain't nobody thinking about him no more. I can't even say his name. To hell with that name. I can't say it. He gone. You got Jaden Daniels in now, and everything has changed here. And he's doing it with Dan Quinn. Out of all the people, that's Dan Quinn is here. Joe Witt Jr. on the other side on the defensive coordinator. It's lovely. Like, and I'm gonna stop there. I can keep going.
Well, it's funny you say on a boat because that's where the Giants have been ever since. Like ever since they were on a boat, like they're nowhere near this conversation. And I do want to specify BLG just because Alexander asked in the chat, I think on the BGN side, why is there a Cowboy? Braylon said pointless for the Cowboys. I don't want to be here, to be very clear. I'm here because the mixtape all along has been Brandon and myself. But it is the NFC East mixtape, and we're here to discuss it all. And to the point, like we have never discussed Washington. Like they've always been this afterthought. And I've joked about how their only division titles in the last century have been down years for the division at large. But they are incredible. They're respectable. Brandon. Again, the sweetness of it all is why we love sports. They put the Cowboys in the cellar of NFC Championship Game appearances with the win at Detroit on Saturday night. I know you're excited from a Philadelphia perspective, but I think I speak for both of us in saying it's cool that Washington is a threat again.
Well, obviously from the Cowboys angle too, as Jamual mentioned, with Dan Quinn. There's Kellen Moore as the Eagles offensive coordinator. So
I'm trying to get off the Cowboys just so the whole audience knows.
It's
like
just very funny though
Okay.
too that it's like, you know, this huge game between the Eagles and Commanders does have like these Cowboys tie-ins to it at an unexpected level, certainly. You know, with Mike McCarthy now being gone, both of his top assistants in like these high positions, like it's just very strange. But yeah, I mean, certainly again unexpected. I think probably going back to the off season, I forget when we stopped doing the mixtape. Probably like April.
It was like right before the draft. Incidentally, what with Jaden Daniels playing a huge role in all of this.
Yeah, so I think we were starting to say, if I recall correctly, I think maybe I was starting to say like, you know, how things could be different for Washington. Certainly, no one would have said like, okay, they're gonna, you know, make a run all the way this year. But it did feel like they're going in the right direction. In part, mostly because Dan Snyder is gone, but also because I'm gonna just make this up and say I was saying this anyway all along, that like the fact that we saw CJ Stroud, how much that can change like a team's outlook in just one season, a rookie quarterback playing that well. I felt like, you know, there was potential for the Commanders if Jaden Daniels could come in, and certainly I didn't see him being this good, and certainly Jamal deserves credit for Adam Schefter coming on his podcast and basically telling everyone that the Commanders were going to take Jaden Daniels basically at that point, because prior to that it wasn't as like clear cut that was going to be the case. So last time we talked, RJ, I said, like, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be the best quarterback in this division for years to come, you know, barring injury or something, his career suddenly going sideways.
Jamal, I mean, no offense to the other Hogs Haven people or the Trap or Die people, and I've been on y'all's podcast and love all of you, but I think it's appropriate that you're the person that is our kind of Washington person, because you mentioned it. You have always been even keeled. You are very Jaden Daniels-esque in that sense. Like you have been a metronome. I don't even know if waiting for this moment is fair. Like, I don't know if it's fair to say you ever thought this moment was possible, but what is it like? I think like that's the important thing. Like, can you believe that it's here and it's real and it's about to happen?
Man, I told people when we was recording the All 32 side, man, and we record on Tuesday. I said, look, only 5 more nights sleep. Like I can't wait for the show to be over, so I go to sleep, like, and wake up for the next day and go back to sleep. But I mean, honestly, man, it's exciting, and I think you did raise an interesting question that I don't really think I faced head on, like something that I've anticipated. Like I knew one of my favorite things. I started scouting about 3 years ago, like taking it serious and like really looking at tape and understanding like the science of it. Like really went to the Scouting Academy for those who are interested in scouting. Like I took that serious and I took advantage of the teleworking, you know, working from home and putting in those hours, those scouting hours. My favorite thing that I ever done was taking the time to dissect thousands of snaps of Jaden Daniels. Like, I knew from the get-go, after watching everything, I knew that this was the guy that Washington needed to get. And of course I had my doubts, but those were just like natural doubts. Like, what if I'm just wrong? Or what if I'm like flat out wrong? But I really believe in this guy. And so when he came aboard and everything aligned from the off season, from his preparation, from training camp, from preseason itself, and even early on, like that first game against Tampa Bay was a little shaky. I was like, all right, rookie nerves or rookie, etc. Like he missed some things on the field. But as the weeks went on, you start seeing how he's processing. It's like, okay, this is what I saw at LSU. Like, this is exactly who I saw. And I saw this the first year he was at LSU. And like things just kept improving. And so for me, when I saw what was capable from a quarterback position with this team, and even when people ask like when did I know like this team was real, it started in a Cincinnati game. That the way that he was on fire, the way that him and Cliff connected from a chemistry standpoint. But you follow that game with the games against the Cleveland Browns and the Arizona Cardinals. Like, of course, I didn't think Cleveland was good at all. But I also thought that was a potential trap game. Like, those things existed for teams like Washington. Like, can you get over these past, scar tissue moments of previous teams where like people had this PTSD with this team and they constantly knocked down those walls and said, you can trust us. You can trust us here. You can trust us there. Like, this team, this coaching staff, all of that stuff is different. And I think after those 3 games, I'm like, you know what? I'm all in on this team. I'm glad that the fan base is back. I'm glad that I'm back. Like, I had so much skepticism with this team prior to, the new regime. I didn't trust these guys. I didn't trust the head coach. I hated the previous head coach. He's a liar. He's a manipulator. I never seen somebody who got mad at people asking him the tough questions. How you get mad at somebody for asking some fair questions, and then on top of that, you're lying about it, and you try to gaslight them. Like, if you suck, you suck. Just acknowledge that you're not good. And I think for Washington fans, I think this is probably the fastest moment or instance of calmness you could ever get for somebody that robbed 25 years of your fandom. Some people who've never seen success, and they gift you with a quarterback who, as long as he stays healthy, as long as he continues doing what he's doing right now, like, they instantly gratify you or give you that quarterback where you can really see Super Bowls in your future. I love it.
BLG. I think it's appropriate that the moment Jamal and everybody knew was the Cincinnati game, because you brought up CJ Stroud, and it was kind of then for him last year when everybody thought, okay, like the Texans and Stroud might be for real.
Yeah, for me, it was like kind of the 1-2 punch of the Giants game, where they didn't even score a touchdown in that game. Was that like week 2? And Daniels got banged up a little bit at one point in that game too. But like, all that together, he just looks so composed. And that's what the word everyone is really saying about him since then. It's just like, he doesn't look like a rookie, and he is older for a rookie, so that goes into it. But there's so much composure there. And that's what really stood out to me, because like, things weren't going right for the Commanders. They kept stalling out in the red zone that day, but like, Jaden Daniels never looked like frustrated or rattled. It's just like, he just kept going out there and leading the Commanders on field goal drives, and that was enough to beat the Giants that day. And I was like, that really stuck out to me. I was like, wow, that guy's really composed. Like, it wasn't like, because I just want to point that out as opposed to like, you've seen plenty of players have like amazing games. Like, bad quarterbacks have had amazing games. Like, that's not off the table for bad quarterbacks. But like, to see that kind of composure, that was different to me. And then he followed it up with the Bengals game, and I was like, okay, the 1-2 punch of those two things. Like, because then you saw the composure element in the Giants game, and then you saw like the kind of the ceiling that he can get to and be able to go up against the top quarterback in Joe Burrow. And then on a Monday Night Football stage too, on the road was that, I think. In any case, just like really impressive. So he's been impressive all season. But I guess, since to balance it out a little bit, because there's been so much Jaden Daniels hype and love, and deservingly so. But I guess, like, we've all talked about that. If there is any kind of weakness, if there is any kind of like drawback, what would you say that is?
Man, that's hard to answer. Like, I'm really not lying to you. Think about it from this perspective. One of the issues or concerns that people had in college was that he held the ball too long, from like the pressure to sack ratio. He didn't know when a play was dead. Sometimes people thought, and I disagree with this, but I disagree with this one that I'm about to say, but this was a narrative in that, he stared down one person too long, and if that wasn't there, he takes off. Like, he doesn't really go through his progressions. He doesn't throw in the middle of the field. Another one that I disagree with. So like, those narratives though existed. Those were real things that were put out there. People relied on analytics to prove that point, and like, those were disproven over the course of the season. He's a person who throws with anticipation, and like, you need that in order to stay on schedule within the progression of a play. And if I had to say, like, if there's like one weakness, if anything, I mean, look, sometimes you can see he gets a little, he may get a little too aggressive, or maybe when he does scramble, he doesn't sometimes coaches have to reemphasize to keep his eyes downfield versus like trying to take off. Like, you could miss some of the bigger plays, and that instance happened. Like, you could have had a couple touchdowns against the New York Giants that first game you're talking about with field goals. Mm-hmm. That was early in the season. Those things existed, but it's happened later in the season as well. Just had those moments where he has lapses where, like, if you can scramble, keep a play alive with your eyes versus trying to like take off. Like, look for the play as a passer versus looking for making something happen as a runner. Sometimes when he sees some pressure, I think the man coverage things confuses him, or from the standpoint of like, he doesn't really trust it more I mean, he doesn't really trust it the same as what he trusts against zone. So sometimes like tighter coverage, he can, be hesitant to pull the trigger. But I still think that's minimal in terms of like the concern level. Because he still makes the throws now, but like it's not as big of a deal as it once was. So yeah, I truly think like, and I know you said we're looking for weaknesses, but if you think about it, I'll ask both of you all, and I won't even comment. Like who in the NFC is playing better than Jaden Daniels? Like I'll leave it there. I won't even answer my opinion. Like it's hard to really point out weaknesses.
I think that like this kind of phrase gets said a lot, and it was something that we said about, and I think Brandon even agreed to a certain point in 2022 when it was Dallas and Philly kind of going back and forth during that first run the Eagles had in this little era. It feels like the Eagles are better 2-53. That's just the way Howie Roseman built his roster, but that Dallas might have had the superior passer at the time. That I think that I would certainly take Jaden Daniels, over Jalen Hurts right now, especially this version of Jalen Hurts. And so it depends on what you value to be playing better. You know what I mean? Like it is a bit of a vague and subjective sort of thing. I don't think that they have many weaknesses. I think it's, it's interesting that the betting line is as large as it is, 6.5 points as we sit here right now. Some of that might just be some deference to Philly.
I respect it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's weird because I almost trust them against any team in the NFL except for Philadelphia. And it's appropriate. Like this, I didn't tell Brandon this, but I watched Interstellar for the first time this week. Like I had never seen it in my life, and it was really good.
I saw you bring this up on other
yeah,
you've done.
And so it's like sitting in my mind because as I was watching it, I was like, that's the meme. Like the whole time I was like, oh, this is the thing. Like everybody talked about this or whatever. And so this title game is sort of like soaking in NFC Eastness the way that experience was soaking in all this like pop culture stuff for me, because the most important thing in this game isn't Jaden Daniels or any weaknesses. It's Saquon. And like how fitting that like he would be the straw stirring this drink. And that's why like if the Eagles did not have him, I would totally take the Commanders. I'm not necessarily spoiling or tipping my pick, but I just have such a hard time. But it's the amplification of Saquon by the Eagles offensive line specifically. Like it almost has nothing to do with any potential or hypothetical or non-existent weaknesses from the Washington or Jaden side of things, because they have that specific thing.
It's almost a little bit similar to the Eagles Super Bowl matchup against the Chiefs in terms of like you were just talking there, RJ, about like 2-53 versus, like the Eagles had the more stacked roster going up into that Super Bowl against the Chiefs, like inarguably, but the Chiefs obviously had the best quarterback. But weirdly enough, I would say Jalen outplayed Mahomes on that specific day. Like Jalen had a really good game in that one. Certainly,
Jalen had a fumble that was a direct result or a direct reason why they lost that game.
I think Patrick.
He
Mahomes
had a fumble that was returned for a touchdown.
I'm not saying
that one slide. I'm saying
about to let that slide. He was amazing in that game, and obviously
he literally costed them 6 points.
Are you gonna let me get to my point? But he's like obviously nothing like that at this point, which is the relevant. If we want to relitigate that, we can spend 50 minutes on that for no real reason of accomplishing anything. But for now, he's not anything close to that, and obviously that is a huge reason why there's a case for big time optimism for the Commanders, despite being 6 or 6.5 point underdogs, depending where you look there. So I do think that's kind of an interesting element in this game. And obviously the fact too that, these teams have played twice earlier this season, but Jalen gets knocked. Well, it's really the first one. Jaden Daniels is not quite 100%. He was dealing with like that rib injury kind of at the time he played, but he didn't look quite like himself. And he kind of had a tough couple of games there and has been certainly better after the Commanders' late bye this season. And Jalen Hurts gets knocked out of the second game early in the first quarter. Kenny Pickett takes over. So this, and Jalen is also maybe banged up this week. We'll see. He's on the injury report. He's dealing with the knee. The big question is what his mobility will be like in this game. Hard to say until we actually see it. But yeah, I mean the Saquon factor of it all. It's just very unexpected. As someone who used to think that Saquon was overrated, I mean, he's just been so awesome. He's just unstoppable.
That's interesting. I would love. I didn't mean to cut you. I'm interested to just hear your opinion on Saquon now that you thought that he was overrated. Not to say that you were right or wrong, but more so like now that he's on your team, you've seen a whole season's worth. Like, how did you think he was overrated versus like how did your opinion sway now?
I didn't think he was bad, to be clear. When we talk about overrated, it's not like I don't think he's terrible. I just think like, okay, he's the number 2 overall pick. Everyone talks about him like he's unstoppable. But, how often did we really see him being that difference maker for the Giants? And now it's obviously apparent that he didn't have like even the threshold of support around him that would allow him to be this special. Like, I mean, people are lying if they said, even if you're the biggest Saquon fan, that like they saw him doing what he's done this season. Like it's incredible. He with 148 rushing yards, he's going to break the all-time NFL record for most yards by a player ever if you're including the playoffs. It's held by Terrell Davis. Like that's insane, and he could do it in this game alone. Like he might not even need 2 more games to get to that.
He was overrated though, like relative to what he was doing at that time. Like we say all the time, multiple things can be true. Like it can be true that some of the overratedness was unfair, but like, and the overratedness is also subjective in that, like, and obviously the 3 of us probably heard it more loudly than, I don't know, a Chiefs fan or whatever, just because it was a division rivalry sort of thing. But like he had that stellar rookie season, and then he was kind of coasting off of that from a reputation standpoint for a very long time. We certainly, I think, understood then and now more than ever understand that it was a result of the lack of talent around him. But he was overrated. Like he was treated like he was performing like this special player, and he wasn't at the time. So I think it was fair to call him overrated.
What if now I understand that angle. And I don't know what Giants fans were saying. I won't lie to you, but like, what if the conversation existed that they understood that there was, first off, he dealt with some nagging injuries like here and there, kept him out from even seeing the field consistently, but also like if they never bolstered up that offensive line, but they know what he's capable of, like if he's just fully healthy, like he's creating a lot, or maybe he's trying to bounce. Like I know one conversation that existed when he was healthy is like he's always looking for that explosive play. And that's what hurt him and on some occasions too. I think maybe that's something that they will probably try to argue. And I'm speaking from the standpoint again of like I don't know the full conversation from Giants fans, but I always thought that Saquon was good. I just never, to your point, RJ, I just never knew how good he could be. So I don't disagree with the overrated conversation. I think that's fair at one point. But I do think if we're talking about like where his talent level existed, maybe I was slept on it. He was always top 10. Maybe I slept on that idea. He was always top 10. I just never really stood on 10 toes about it.
I think we're learning in the NFC East specifically. It's a great like kind of vacuum to like conduct these experiments in, that it's not fair to any player or coach to evaluate them based on time served with the Giants or Cowboys. Like this game is a great example of that. I mean, isn't it? like look at Saquon, look at Dan Quinn, look at Kellen Moore, look at Joe Witt, look at Dorrance Armstrong, look at Tyler Biadasz, look at Dante Fowler, right? Like, that's not to say that like you're forever cursed if you go to the Giants or the Cowboys, but it is fair to say that circumstances matter, right? Like, and I don't know that any of us like said or thought, and I think we've all kind of said this, like, oh, Saquon sucked when he was at the Giants. We all understood that to some level it was a result of this, the environment. But it does make me pause, and I recognize how stupid this is going to sound, and think like, what would Daniel Jones look like if he'd gotten that chance in Minnesota earlier over Sam Darnold? Like, like there's, and it makes me, I don't mean to make this about the Cowboys. I'm certain you both have thoughts on the coaching stuff. We can get to that later, but like, it makes me continue to defend people like Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott, because they are very clearly weighed down in a way that the Commanders have been liberated from, and that Philadelphia just hasn't been, because they want to win more than anybody else.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I think it's been kind of like a big picture takeaway this year in the NFL that like situation, does matter a lot. And I don't think it's everything. Like there has to be a threshold, right? Like you can't just say like literally any player could be good if you just had the right situation. Sometimes sure, there are players who are bad, and like that's just is what it is. But certainly when you look at like Sam Darnold and how he was able to have a revival, and now multiple years of Baker Mayfield, and even someone on the Eagles like Zach Bond. Like think about how crazy it was for a guy playing like rotational edge rusher and the Saints, comes to Philadelphia. Vic Fangio moves him to off-ball linebacker, and he's like he's literally a defensive player of the year finalist by the AP. Like that's an insane development. So yeah, I think there is something absolutely to like sometimes you need to get a guy in a different situation, and that can make a huge difference.
And to that point, though, like, what was the opinion? Again, he was a role player. Let's acknowledge that. But what was the opinion of people in Philly, Brandon, about Olamide Zaccheaus? Like, what was the opinion about him?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I'll speak for myself here. Like, I thought the Eagles should have resigned him. I thought he was a nice, like third, fourth kind of receiver. But they didn't, clearly. And then they trade for Jahan Dotson, who has really basically done nothing here for the most part. So
yeah.
I don't think people. I think people were just so burnt. The opinion on OZ at the time was just like everyone was so burnt out on the 2023 season, anything associated with it. I don't think anyone was sad to see him go, but I personally thought they should have kept him.
I'm here to prove that Brandon's lying, Jamal. And so I don't know if you knew this, but back when we were doing episodes consistently, something we would do in the off season was an all NFC East team, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? Like we would just essentially build like a 2 deep, not even a 2 deep, just starters across the offense and defense. And when we got to the third wide receiver discussion at that, I think it was after the 2022 season, we agreed that AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb were wide receivers 1 and 2. BLG argued in name of Zaccheaus over Terry McLaurin to be the third wide receiver on the all NFC East team. So, yeah. I mean, look, we all have bad takes because I had argued for Michael Gallup in that spot.
I don't remember that at all.
I'm not here to say like everything I've ever said.
So I brought up OZ at the right time.
I'm just saying, like, Brandon has at one point in time.
I don't think I ever said
that. On the all.
Where's
NFC
the
East
evidence
team.
of that?
Check the channel history.
You check the channel. You're just, this is libelous content for me.
It's not libelous. I know it to be fact.
I don't remember saying that.
Just because you don't remember it doesn't mean it's not true. I mean,
all right, someone in the chat figure that out if that's true. I don't think that's true.
Well, again, I may have the timing off, but at one point in time, I know we had a heated debate because he wanted to.
Why would I say OZ over Devontae Smith too? That doesn't make any sense.
I think it was Devon.
You think
I don't know.
Saying
My
is
point
I
is
said
you threw him out for
OZ is better than both Terry McLaurin and Devontae Smith. I was saying that. You really think I was saying that?
I can't justify your own thought process. I'm just telling you that at one point in time, you argued for him on the team.
But to the OZ question again, we understand, and that's why I prefaced it. I know he's a role player, right? So it is what it is. But I think to your actual point, you and RJ, like the understanding of fit and understanding where somebody is on a team and what their role is on a team is something where it's like, at least on Washington's side, and like and even Vic Fangio, like understanding how to best use a player and even look at De'Ami Brown in the playoffs. He's a person who missed probably a couple, I don't know exactly how many, but a couple games towards the end of the season. Mm-hmm. Obviously Noah Brown goes out, I think against, was it Philly? I don't know. It was, or Tennessee, one of those, and he misses, he's done for the season with the internal organ injury. But De'Ami comes out blazing against Tampa Bay, and he's second or third in the NFL in receptions and receiving yards in the playoffs. And he's on the contract year. So he's about to make him some money in the offseason, regardless if it's with Washington or not. But the role that these coaches are finding for some of these players and the faith clearly that paid off for Zach Bond in Philly. And then obviously OZ, De'Ami in Washington. And that was just a couple of people like Zach Ertz. They didn't even expect Zach Ertz to have the role that he has right now in Washington. They said they anticipated him to be more of a red zone opportunity guy, and he's ended up starting and being a full-time tight end for these guys for 17 games. Mind you, health issues. He missed. He had a concussion, but he cleared, came back the next week. But he's been relatively healthy all season. So he had something to prove, but the coaches understood the role that he could play. So it's just a lot that's going on with these coaching staffs on both sides for Philadelphia's defense, and then obviously Washington's offense on our side, and technically Joe Witt too. Frankie Louvu's Washington's Micah Parsons. It's crazy. I look at him laughing. I want to see how that works, but he is, but he's not on the scale of Micah, of course. But right. The way that they utilize him, edge rusher. Interior pass rusher, off-ball linebacker, coverage, run defense. He's just that missile that Washington loves to utilize. He can blow some plays up, and he plays with reckless abandon, and I think that's something that clearly benefits Washington.
real quick on like OZ and even Zach Ertz, former Eagle Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz caught a
Man, yeah,
game-winning
this game is
touchdown
weird. Like,
for
there's
the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Zach Ertz.
didn't
It is
catch
weird.
that.
He did catch it, and they won the game. So, I think a lot of that is Daniels, though. Like, to get back to Jaden Daniels of it all, like he's clearly making his targets better, and like all those guys are like having the best seasons or whatever of their career. I mean, coaching staff, factor and everything, all that. But I think a lot of it's just like he throws a good ball and he is making those players better, which is what a good quarterback does, and also it makes the Commanders scary in the long run because like Zach Ertz isn't gonna be here for years and years to come, and he's having like a nice season for what he is, but like he's not a long-term piece. And OZ probably like maybe not a long-term. A lot of these guys aren't even necessarily outside of Terry McLaurin like long-term pieces, and that makes Washington scary. Like if they could actually get like if we're gonna say Terry McLaurin is AJ Brown, like a Devontae Smith, their own Devontae Smith version of that to Terry McLaurin, like that's scary and that's a huge deal. But you did touch on the defense, I guess. And I think, that's for as much praise as we're giving to Jaden Daniels here, the Commanders defense, like that seems to be where they can be had a little bit. And that is the weakness. And certainly that is like the more interesting side of the matchup from the Eagles perspective of, like, can they stop Saquon Barkley? Can they limit this Eagles passing game, which has very much struggled, but they've had issues with AJ Brown this year, even when they played in week 16 and Marshawn Lattimore was there. So for as good as the Commanders defense is, I would say, like, what are some of the issues that unit has?
Yeah, it's like the explosives in the run game is really frustrating at times. It didn't dawn on me until somebody else said this during the week. Washington has played 17 games regular season, including Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs in the postseason. We've played so many of the league's top 12 running backs. Like we went through people go through the gauntlet of quarterbacks. We went through the gauntlet of running backs this year, and it's rough. It's clearly rough. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's also no excuse for how Washington has been able to fit their runs. And there is no stopping Saquon. Like Washington, if I told John Stolten this earlier, I said, man, look, I said, bro, if Washington finds a way to keep Saquon under 100, let alone like 70 yards, I might cry. Like that is how I have no expectation of them being able to stop him. I think the issue with Washington and what they face here is limiting the explosive plays from being game-breaking plays. Like, don't let that 15, 20-yarder end up being a 50-yarder, 60-yarder, housing it to the end zone. In Washington's best place or best position to do that is to play disciplined football all across the board. I'm talking about all three levels of run support. I think Joe Witt or maybe Dan Quinn, I can't remember who said it exactly. They said it perfectly in their presser though. Like, don't be afraid or don't get upset at playing a boring brand of football. Like, understand that executing your assignment and making sure that you execute what you're supposed to do is getting the job done. Trust your teammates, get the tackles, understand your angles on Saquon, because Saquon is an elusive back, not from the standpoint of like he can literally make you miss in one-on-one, but like he's elusive from the standpoint of he understands from a vision standpoint, if I can get this guy to get out of his gap and manipulate him to move this way so I can cut back, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to test you. I'm going to stress your defense at the point of attack. And that is Saquon to a T. But also the fact that he's so explosive, he doesn't have to be running at full speed to make a play. Like, all it takes is just 2 yards of space, a foot of space, and he's off. So I think Washington isn't necessarily in a position to sit here and say, we're going to shut down Saquon. I wouldn't even entertain that language. Again, if it happens, I'll cry. But at the same time, like, can we limit the explosives? And if we can limit the explosives and try to find a way to take advantage of those passing downs where Jalen has to make a play with his arm, we're in good shape. But Saquon, he's going to be the challenge, of course, and we all know that.
I I think it's amazing that we're having this conversation about a Dan Quinn-led team, given the way the second half of the season went for the Cowboys last year, when they got ran all over by the likes of Miami and Buffalo. They got just kind of dominated in an overall sense by Seattle and certainly by Green Bay in the playoffs, obviously. I do think that he's kind of learned from that. Obviously, he's been around the game for a long time, but to your point, Jamal, about, hey, look, I mean, Saquon, I think you have to accept, like, Saquon is going to get his at a certain point in time. Like, and that's, I mean, it's amazing that the Eagles have had all this success. And then I think we all agree, like, yeah, if you know, Washington puts this game on Jalen's shoulders, like, the Eagles will probably lose. That's a weird thing to be true about the quarterback of a team who's had all this success. And especially because I don't trust Kellen Moore to get this done with Jalen Hurts, which is, you know, topical, obviously, as it relates to the Cowboys, although where the Cowboys are at this exact moment in time, I would take Kellen Moore 100 times over Brian Schottenheimer. But again, I've never been down this bad. But Brandon, like, if this is a Jalen Hurts, this could be like the indictment of Jalen Hurts. Like, this could be like an all-time, you know, bad day in Eagles franchise history from a memory standpoint, if it is put on his shoulders and he obviously fails the challenge.
Yeah, this has been like the conversation each week. It's very like tiring from just like a content creation standpoint, because it's just like, it's literally, we're just talking about the same thing every week. There's no like new angle to it. It's that the passing game isn't good and Hurts needs to be better, and eventually this will cost the team. And like, it could, no one is, and I think at least I am under no illusions that is absolutely true. But also, like, when they're 2 wins away from winning the Super Bowl, it's also like, well, actually it might not cost them, because the defense might be that good and the running game might be that good. And it's not impossible that Hurts, you know, can play better than he's played thus far, because he's also played, like, you know, so poorly, relatively speaking, at least in terms of like passing volume. That is such a low bar, is what I'm trying to say, that it's not really that hard for him to necessarily clear that at some point. But until you actually see it happen, I don't know. I think it's possible he could play better. I just, like, I can't say, like, I definitely know it's going to happen, because we just haven't seen it a lot this year. We have seen it at times. Bengals game, you look at the Steelers game late in the season, there have been moments, the Steelers game especially, like, they were really focused on Saquon. They were really trying to shut down the run. And there was all these questions about the Eagles passing game coming off of the Panthers game, where they played pretty poorly, and A.J. Brown's frustrated after the game and everything. And they responded. They responded really well in that game.
Let me interject here to kind of contextualize this, if you don't mind. Jamal, which passing game, if you ranked the three that Washington is facing the playoffs so far, like, can you rank them for me? Baker and Liam Cohen, Detroit and Ben Johnson and Jared Goff, or Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts? Like, how do you rank those three in terms of most feared to least feared?
Most feared, Baker Mayfield,
and Liam Cohen.
Because
I think the play caller is a factor, especially because we've seen Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson get head coaching jobs in the time since.
It's a reason why Washington dominated time of possession and held the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to 20 points. They did not want Baker on the field, and the only reason why Washington won, and I don't apologize for not a damn thing, is Baker Mayfield fumbling in his own territory. You get a chance to get the possession back, you end up scoring, and you're back in the game. But he only had like 3 incompletions on the day. Like, he was that efficient. Mike Evans in the first half was cooking, went quiet in the second half, but yeah, those are number one. Number two is Detroit Lions and Jared Goff and OC Williams guy and Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra and all them guys. But in terms of fair, that's one thing. But I also like how Joe Witt's approach was. Like, he baited, he used Jared Goff's weaknesses against him, forced him to make some throws that it's like, are you going to stick to what we give you, or are you going to try and make these tight window throws because your Eagles at play or something like that? And you know, he forced himself into 3 interceptions and good for in 4 turnovers total. But in terms of like what they provide and what the OC provides, that's number 2. But funny enough, and what I appreciate with Philadelphia, even though I rank them as number 3, I love you all's competitive arrogance. And what I mean by that is, like, Marshawn is going to have his hands full Sunday. And while Washington has to find a way to limit Saquon, Philly's gonna obviously be aware of that. Like, that's not a secret. They're gonna try and do strength, run their strength, but at the same time, like, they have AJ Brown, they have Devontae Smith. I tell people this entire week, if I'm Washington, I'm not letting Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Sanderson check anybody else that's not named Devontae and AJ. Like, those two are sticking on those two no matter where they go. Noah Igbenogany, I love you. You've been playing good this year. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. But you ain't checking neither one of those two. Stick your ass on Jahan Dotson. That's who you stay on. You ain't going on nobody else. But AJ, they targeted Marshawn like 6 or 7 times the first time that they played. And I fully understand it. I respect it. And Marshawn needs to understand that I think Philly is going to come right back at him this week. He needs to be on his A game. It don't matter what his reputation was in New Orleans. He's had some quiet games in a good way. Against Detroit, he wasn't targeted. New Orleans Saints, he wasn't targeted. But the Saints quarterback situation, they have no receivers, nothing. But like he's had some quiet days. But Philadelphia, a different breed, and I love it because of your competitive arrogance. And I think AJ is going to have an opportunity to get physical against another cornerback who's just as physical as him. So if there's one thing that I respect, is like, this is a matchup that's actually made for the Philadelphia Eagles receivers. Is can Washington match the energy defensively from the cornerback standpoint against AJ and the Devontae and Jalen Hurts as well?
Yeah, the AJ Lattimore matchup is going to be huge in this one. I mean, the Eagles targeted AJ 15 times in the last game against the Commanders. He had 8 for 97 and a touchdown. And there was also like probably, I don't know, let's say 60 more yards and pass interference penalties or so in that game. Because Lattimore was having some issues. Eagles got some generous calls too, but it was a mix. I think it was clear that Lattimore was not just shutting down AJ Brown in that game, as typically no one really does. Although AJ only has 3 catches for 24 over the past 2 weeks, just feels like probably going to be going a little bit more than that, just because he's so good. He also had 2 drops last week, which he hadn't had a single drop since like late in the 2023 season. It was also snowing, so like, I don't know, kind of just a weird game. Maybe his gloves were wet. I don't know. But yeah, AJ is huge. I also think kind of like under discussed in this game, importance wise, is Dallas Goedert, because Goedert was not there for the last game. And the Eagles had so many runs just get blown up by their backup tight end, Grant Calcaterra, who's more of like a move tight end, not like an inline guy. And CJ Uzoma, who's now on the injured reserve. Like, they were just getting blown up, and also like not even knowing what to do. Like, they were just missing blocking assignments in that game. So the fact that Goedert hasn't practiced this week, as I'm looking right here on Twitter right now, it seems like he is back today. We'll see if he's able to go. But if he is, I think that's a big development. He also had success against the Commanders as a receiver in the first game with, I think, like 5 catches on 5 targets.
How bad is the injury this week? Like, is it like a serious conversation, or like something that you think that he can toughen up and play on Sunday?
He's been perpetually banged up this year with like different things, like hamstring, shoulder, knee, whatever. Okay. So this time it's an ankle. The fact that he's like practicing on Friday makes me think he's going to like try to go. But honestly, like, that's the thing. Like I was just saying, like, even if he's not like super dynamic as a pass catcher, but he can contribute as a run blocker, like, I almost would like take that. Like, they are as a team, they're like way better numbers wise when he's in there, their running game specifically, than when he's out. There's like a big time split there. So I think that's a big deal.
I'm a fan of Goedert. And honestly, like, from a tight end standpoint altogether, this game, I think both tight ends are going to play a role. You mentioned run and pass versatility for Goedert. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Zach Ertz as a run blocker this year, but for whatever reason, like, his competitive fire, like, it stood out in the playoffs. And to that point, I'm like, all right, well, can we keep getting the same effort in the run game as you like, he's cooking DBs and linebackers as a receiver. Like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, I was a fan of you in the regular season, but what you're doing in the postseason is different. And I'm like, all right, well, if we get this on Sunday, I'm loving what I'm seeing, point blank period. But to your point, Brandon, like, Dallas Goedert is something where I think the tight ends can really cause a mismatch against Washington, that second level area as a pass catcher. You mentioned him as a run blocker. I wasn't too familiar with this game, but obviously if he's a key component to that aspect, I think the edge and setting the edge for Washington is going to be a big deal. And if you can get that tight end help on those combination blocks with the left tackle or the right tackle, however you line them up at weak side, strong side, you can really help yourself out. But that at that point, it's on Washington to really be physical at the point of attack. But if that, I think Dallas Goedert is going to be a big deal, just as much as Zach Ertz for real.
Speaking of Ertz, RJ, I know you haven't talked in a while, but remember last time we did the pod is that that was the after the game, Nick Sirianni, daps up Zach Ertz as one would just normally do, except Nick apparently felt it was too hard or whatever and didn't like that, and then told Zach that he didn't even contribute to the Commanders' win that day.
Oh, that's real. That's what he said?
Yeah, something to that effect. Yeah. So weird. And also, I mean, gave the Commanders bulletin board material, at least Zach Ertz's personal bulletin board material there. So not thrilled about that. But I do think, within this, I think it's going to be a chippy game. I really do. We saw that last game where there was a lot of that energy. Obviously, GJ gets ejected at one point, which it must have been really bad, because when do you ever see a player just getting ejected for saying something?
I still don't know. I still don't know what happened.
What could he have said? So, yeah, I think it's going to be a real chippy game in this one.
I think that we started talking about Jaden and Saquon kind of checks this box, but given the I guess the likelihood of it, first of all, but just kind of the way the game is, there will be an NFC East sort of hero on either side, whether it's Zach Ertz or whether it's Kellen Moore or Dan Quinn, somebody who has this and that's where it is such an interesting thing, something I was thinking about, because somebody commented that I've been in hell, and it's true, this has just sucked, and because I'm partly on with one eye keeping tabs on waiting for the Cowboys to hire the worst head coach possible, so I'm just in a perpetual state of misery. But something I was thinking about was I've always thought it was strange when a coordinator gets a promotion to a head coach and stays within the division. I think you could use this specific season as an argument for Dan Quinn, why it's a benefit. Why it's a benefit. We joked, at least at Blogging the Boys, over the offseason about all the Cowboys. I'm sure you saw, Jamal. Dorrance Armstrong and Tyler Biadasz and Dante Fowler. You mentioned Noah Brown. But there is something, I think, to BLG, you obviously talked about Dallas Goedert and AJ Brown. Dan Quinn has been, I'm not saying that there are defensive coordinators who don't know who these players are, but Dan Quinn has a wealth of experience very recently in game planning for them. It is an interesting wrinkle to this, and I suppose that works both ways with Kellen Moore, and certainly with Zach Ertz understanding things. There will be an NFC East hero that emerges for one of these teams. I think we'll look back and say it was, this guy who had it. I did want to ask, or just pose the question, who faces the most pressure in this game? I guess how precious of an opportunity each of you feel it is, because as somebody who is a fan of a team that hasn't been to this stage in a very, very long time, there's no guarantees. There's no, I know it's easy to think oh, the Eagles are so good, we'll just be here every year. Or if you're the Commanders, oh man, this is year one of the Dan Quinn project. We'll be back over and over again. There are no promises. And I think Jamal, but I'll let you answer first. I think Philadelphia is under more pressure, because I think about something Troy Aikman has said a lot, that when they won their third Super Bowl in the 90s, that it wasn't even fun. And that's something that Patrick Mahomes has said a little bit. But he said because they felt this intense pressure to get it done. And obviously that was the one without Jimmy Johnson. And I do feel the Eagles probably feel man, we got to get one actual bite at the apple in this little run. And if we lose to the Commanders and now it's all about them owning the division, I kind of think that's why Washington's playing with more freedom or looseness, so to speak.
Yeah. Washington has been playing with house money going into Detroit. Beating Tampa Bay was from a fan base standpoint and local reporters and people who are around that Washington team, beating Tampa Bay was doable. And it was about getting the dub. And after that, it's okay, if we can beat Detroit, we're good still. But at the same time, we're playing with house money. The pressure was on Detroit. Went in there and smoked them. Forced 5 turnovers on the Lions. And basically had the boy crying at the podium at the end of the game. And then Philadelphia,
they took no heat for that loss. I'm so pissed about this.
It is crazy.
Nobody held the Lions accountable. Everybody's oh, well, they had all these injuries. No, dude, they got smoked off the bye after talking an enormous amount of crap. Man, and people were like, "Oh, Nick Sirianni lost both of his coordinators. Like he's going to be this loser now." Nobody's saying anything about it. It's annoying. I'm sorry, Jamal. I just really
No, you're good. I'm over here agreeing with you. Like it's the noise behind the Lions losing in the divisional round was more centered around the injuries, but also centered around the fact that like people were also shocked at what the Commanders did. Honestly, like so like it's like they get overlooked for losing for those two specific reasons, but it's like at the same time. Y'all are an elite offense. Y'all are the number 1 seed. This is probably one of your better opportunities. I mean, you just beat the Packers and the Vikings to secure that number 1 seed. So like injuries, you had the injuries then, you know,
and to your point, it like the divisional round game wasn't like a house money, like we're just happy to have this free meal thing. Like the whole year was about this. The whole year was literally about getting to this moment, and you failed in the first possible moment. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
This was a Washington.
No. It's fine. But to the point of the question that you did ask, like Washington is playing with house money, and but from a let's understand that like that aspect is what it is. But make no mistake, Washington is playing freer, but they also, I think the misconception with that narrative is that they're just going around and like if we win, we win. I'm not saying that y'all feel that way. But like the narrative of playing with house money and all that thing, they're locked in. And the messaging from the players who are speaking this week, the messaging from the coaches who are speaking this week is actually something that's very impressive. I was speaking about it this morning. They're essentially not verbatim, but they're essentially alluding to the fact that like a lot of people say when you play a team for a third time or play them in the playoffs, it's like, oh, we know this team, like we know this team like the back of our hand. And one of the more impressive things that I'm hearing is like they're not even acknowledging that it's okay. Sure, you played them twice, but you need to dig deeper than understand and then acknowledging that you know these guys. Like, what is the things that you're seeing on tape that you think that you need to hone in on? What are some of these new areas that you can dive in and be better at or bring to the table? This is not the same opponent. Like some things have changed since you last played them. So don't look at it like you know them. And people are, from a player standpoint, talking about we're just trying to get better. Like they're not acknowledging the fact that they're here. They're acknowledging the fact that we have more work to do. And like that's the part that I'm impressed with. But from a macro standpoint, the pressure ain't on Washington because again, they're a 6-point underdog. They've been an underdog in every single game in the playoffs. Like that is the kind of the basis from an understanding of like who has the pressure on them. Philadelphia was the 2 seed. Washington has knocked off the 3 seed. They've knocked off the 1 seed. And if they beat the 2 seed in the conference championship game, that is a feat that needs to have a standalone conversation by itself. But right now, it's about Philadelphia and can they take that, number 2 defense in the NFL, top 3 defense for sure, whatever their actual ranking is. Can they take that top 3 defense in the NFL and Saquon Barkley with that juggernaut of a run game to the Super Bowl? And if they can't do that against the Washington Commanders, that also is going to be a standalone conversation for weeks to come, maybe a couple of days. So I think the pressure on Philly.
BLG, if the Eagles lose, like, I mean, what's that world like?
I think it's a big time missed opportunity because for Saquon to have a season this special, you can't count on that like happening again next year. I mean, I'm not saying he will go down the same exact path as Christian McCaffrey, but it could be one of those deals where running back he's had such a high usage this season. I don't know what that looks like necessarily next year, and if he's able to stay as healthy and as effective and everything, I would lean towards Saquon, kind of like being more of the exception, like Derrick Henry, like in that kind of category, as opposed to some other running backs. But I don't know. I don't feel like totally confident in that. And then the defense, as one of the most common things we've said over the years on this podcast, is like defense is not sticky year to year. And Eagles defense has been, I would say, the best defense in the NFL this season. And I think Vic Fangio has earned a ton of benefit of the doubt, but I don't think they're going to be this good again next season. I don't think they're hopeless because like they are like the 6th youngest roster. They still have pieces here. Howie Roseman, clearly, for the misses he's had a lot more hits lately, and you still feel good about him being able to navigate things. I still think they're going to be a factor in the NFC, certainly. And even when they do have a bad year, they're usually not down for long. They have like a bad year. And even their bad year, like 2023, they collapsed at the end, but they still won 11 games or whatever, made the playoffs. Like even their down years recently haven't been like as down as like getting a top pick in the draft. So, and then obviously, who knows what to make of Hurts and going into next year. And it feels like you have to somehow fix the passing game. So there's a lot of things that you kind of have to figure out if it goes wrong here, and you can't just assume like you're getting back. But I will say, from the standpoint of like, yes, Washington playing with house money, but like for a team, that hadn't been here since '91, it can't. And I ever said earlier in the show, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be the best quarterback in this division for a long time. But what if he has the sophomore slump like C.J. Stroud did? What if the Commanders, who caught everyone by surprise this year because no one's like really afraid of them, are suddenly that team that has the target on their back, and now everyone is really studying what they're doing and trying to like really they're not catching people by surprise next year. So I think there are elements of that too. Where like this could be also a big missed opportunity for the Commanders. Can't just assume they're merely going to get back here. But obviously, I agree that the Eagles have more pressure.
I think we should just pick the game then. I mean, sure. Unless you want to save that and take your shots at the Cowboys head coaching search now. I'm certainly curious.
Let's pick the game and we can get into the Cowboys stuff. I feel like.
I'll go first since. Actually, I'll go last because I feel like my vote's probably the least obvious. So, Jamal, you are the guest on the technically still alive but somewhat defunct NFC East Mixtape. But nevertheless, your pick.
Hey, what's up, E Money? What's up, man? I see that prediction, bro. I hope you're doing well today, E Money. Let me tell y'all something. If y'all follow E Money into Sunday with that prediction, you're losing money. I'll tell you that right now. I got Washington, take the money line, 24-21. But no, on the serious note, I do have Washington winning 24-21. I think that this is like for several reasons. Washington has become like that team of destiny. That's what it feels like is what I should say. I don't think that it only happens if it happens, but it feels like they're a team of destiny. I think the way that they've been performing, like so many people have elevated their play. It's not like they've been playing like this all season. Some of these people who are contributing have even played on a higher level in the playoffs once it started. I think the game plans that Joe Witt has brought out and Cliff Kingsbury has brought out is something where it's like, damn, like they understand what the moment is. And obviously the biggest part of this as well is Jaden Daniels, who has elevated his play as well, like two straight games and 2 postseason games where he's over 300 rushing in passing yards. Like he's contributing a significant amount of the percentage for the offense. It's not like he's one of those rookies where it's like, look, just stare, like drive straight ahead. Don't worry about distractions. Just keep going. Like, no, like lead us. And I think this is probably one of those games, Brandon and RJ, where it's like it's gonna be a classic, and it's gonna come down to like that final 1 or 2 possessions. And I think Jaden is in that moment where he's gonna have an opportunity to win it late, and Washington gets the job done and upsets the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm going 24-21 Washington.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that concerns me. What?
You were, I don't know if you have some sort of lag, but it looked like you were on mute because you were like moving and there was no sound coming. So it might have been a lag.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that concerns me outside of Jaden Daniels in this game is Dan Quinn's aggressiveness. And he's done a really good job of going for it on 4th down. Shout out to PHOY Zach Berman. He pointed out the Commanders have 15, I believe, touchdown drives this year that involve them going for it on 4th down. You look at like go for it rate. We have an article up on Bleeding Green Nation about this. Dan Quinn leads the NFL after a certain stretch here where Nick Sirianni's more middle of the pack. So I kind of worry about that. But ultimately, when it comes to Jaden Daniels, again, could not say more good things about him. But Vic Fangio is really good too. And I'm giving Vic Fangio the benefit of the doubt. I think he has earned that. Specifically, too, as it relates to one of the biggest, I think, could be mismatches in this game. Commanders losing Sam Cosmi, who is their best offensive lineman, I would say. And, Trent Scott seemed to do a decent job filling in against the Lions. But, like, going up against Jalen Carter is a whole different story. And I think Jalen Carter himself has the ability to wreck a game and make, as we saw late in the game against the Rams last week, like a game-winning kind of play. I also think Saquon Barkley is really hard to stop right now. No one is doing that. I am not betting against him. So all told, I think it's a really competitive game. I'm going to say it goes to overtime. I'm going to say Saquon rips off one of those what are becoming signature huge runs, sends the Eagles to the Super Bowl. So I have the Eagles winning this one 34-28. So depending on what the spread is, what you take it at, they might barely just not cover, but I think they do win the game.
I have been, and this is really just mostly the Cowboys like ruining football for me. Far less annoyed with the Eagles this year than I was 2 years ago. Like, you know,
Shocking.
just, you know, it's just, it is what it is type of thing. And again, like I think it's important context that I legitimately like football less than I did this time a year ago, or this time, you know, whatever, 13, 14 months ago. That being said, they're just this machine, and they seem inevitable. And 2 years ago, I picked the Niners in the NFC Championship game. Now, that obviously took a turn that nobody could have foreseen, and who knows what would have happened, although the Niners did destroy them a year later in the Big Dom game, but that's neither here nor there. I think the Commanders have just, I mean, really found something special. Jamal, I don't know if you had seen, I've tweeted this, and BLG and I talked about this. I loved that from a front office standpoint, and obviously there's been this like incredible turnover in the organization. I think even the Texans aired. So many teams draft a quarterback, and then after the first year say, okay, he's real. We have the rookie quarterback contract window. Let's start spending. I loved that the Commanders said, well, the plan is for him to be really good. So let's start spending in year one. Like, why burn year one just to prove that he's good, or whatever the case may be? And so I think that there has been this incredible vision. Are they significantly over delivering in the first year? Absolutely. I don't think there's any question. I agree with you, though. Now that you're here, there's this like, okay, well, it is house money, but like, it's the Super Bowl. Like, you know, like we kind of have to like utilize the house money now. But again, the Eagles and Saquon, they feel so inevitable. However, they feel so pressure ridden. This is ultimately a game about quarterbacks. And I don't know where I rank Jalen Hurts right now in the like hierarchy of NFC quarterbacks, but I don't think it's in the top half. I mean, he is bad. Like, it's so clear that 2022 is this special season that they had to take advantage of, because, as we've said, these types of things are never promised. And I don't know if it will be promised in the future for Jaden Daniels, but I know that he's in the middle of it right now. And I trust Dan Quinn's aggression that BLG outlined. I trust that they're going to be the team that understands we just have to go for broke, because we don't know if we're ever going to get back here. And if we do, we might be a shell of ourselves the way Philadelphia is on the other sideline. I don't have a score prediction, but I think Washington pulls it off. And I partly think that in the most narcissistic way possible, because that would mean that every other NFC East team has been to the Super Bowl since the Dallas Cowboys last have been. Yeah, I think Washington wins. And I think they probably play Buffalo and get a rematch of 1991.
Who do you want to win? Because I think that's a interesting conversation as well. Like, who are you rooting for in this? I know,
feel like that's a tougher question.
Yeah,
actually, I think this is a really easy question, and that might upset y'all. So I was talking to my dad about this, and my dad's obviously a Cowboys fan and a big reason why I am. And Washington is his most preferred team to win the Super Bowl at this point in time. Everybody has Chiefs fatigue, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that's somewhat understandable, even though the three-peat would be historical, whatever. And he's just like, I think on a lower level, feeling the same sort of thing relative to the Bills, and the Eagles are the Eagles. Plus, Jaden Daniels is cool. Dan Quinn is cool. There's this Cowboys crossover. And it might be the name change and all this stuff. Like, it's like, I don't really hate the Commanders, you know, like, it's difficult to like rile myself up and be mad that the Commanders are going to win the Super Bowl or whatever. So, and if you are like chaotic person or rooting for chaos in the hopes that the Cowboys can one day follow this path, you want the most embarrassing possible thing to happen to them. And that would be Washington winning the Super Bowl, not Philadelphia. Like, Philadelphia, I've been there, I've done that. I really don't care. So I kind of want Washington to win. I'm not necessarily rooting more against the Eagles as much as I'm also kind of rooting for Washington.
I got a question for each of you. RJ, what is one biggest, and it may be obvious, but I just want to hear it on record. What is the one biggest hindrance to Dallas replicating the success path that Washington is taking this year?
I think it's the success that both teams have. It's the front office, and because that stems from ownership. Because in this specific case, unlike Washington, it's the same, right? I mean, look around. Like, look.
Do you think it's going to change? Like, that's, no. I think, yeah, and that's.
examine this specific coaching search, like just this moment, like forget the last 3 decades for just a brief moment. This coaching search, they drag their feet on moving on from parting ways with whatever you want to call it, Mike McCarthy, for a week. Because they did that, they costed themselves the opportunity to speak with Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, or Steve Spagnuolo, if you want to go that route, or maybe Matt Nagy. Again, they literally costed themselves the opportunity. Maybe they wouldn't have taken the interview. Maybe it wouldn't have worked out, but still, they were not able to do it. They got lucky. They got lucky that Washington won and gave them a quicker opportunity to speak to Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn. They didn't even call them. They didn't even pursue them. Like, again, maybe you want to argue because there are still coping Cowboys fans that are like, oh, they were never going to come coach here. You still call? Like, you have no idea. You know what I mean? Like, and they don't call because they've decided this is what they want to do. Again, I don't know the pulse of how much you guys have measured of what's going on with the Cowboys because you have much bigger fish to fry right now. The literal plan is for Jason Witten to be the future head coach of this football team. The conscious adults coming up with this in a conference room type setting plan is for that to be the case. That's why Brian Schottenheimer is the dude they're trotting out, is because he's this figurehead. He's this placeholder. He's the only dude. And I don't fault Brian Schottenheimer for this one bit. The guy's been in the NFL for forever, had a cup of coffee in Washington even. He's the only dude who's willing to take this job because at the end of the day, it is an NFL head coaching job, even if it has an expiration date on it, because one of the chosen sons of the Jones boys gets to come in and hold the job what they really want. The same way Jason Garrett did. I mean, in case either of you forgot, the Cowboys hired Jason Garrett before hiring Wade Phillips in 2007. They literally hired their offensive coordinator before hiring their head coach. There's been nothing but chatter about how the Cowboys are going to have Jason Witten on their staff, regardless of who the head coach is going to be. Consider the 4 candidates who they've interviewed formally. Kellen Moore, former Cowboys staffer and player, if we want to go that route. Robert Saleh, Leslie Frazier, not making any accusations, but those did satisfy the Rooney Rule, and Brian Schottenheimer, who's coming off of a 3-year stint with the franchise and obviously the last 2 years as their offensive coordinator. That's it. Like the insistence on nepotism and not involving any level of outside influence is astonishing. So no, I don't think anything's going to change unless they get lucky upon lucky upon lucky. And they've come close in the last 30 years. They've come very, very close to just the players being good enough and opportunity working out for them that they could have maybe possibly done it their way. But the overwhelming likelihood is that that's not going to happen.
Welcome to you're in the real live experience of what Washington dealt with for 25 years with that previous owner who shall not be named, like knowing that it's not going to change, like in year 10 of 25, like it's not going to change no time soon, like until it actually happens. I'm not that part, like I'm reveling in y'all demise, but I'm like that part of knowing that that's not going to change. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, because that's the part where it's like that sucks, because from an ownership standpoint, they don't care. Like they got their other priorities. They just running this thing like it's their toy. So
and unlike Washington, even though the market was very valuable, this is the most valuable professional sports franchise in the world. Like in that game, they're destroying what the owner who won't be named was accomplishing, right? Like, so they're winning their bottom line. They can do these things and it will still work out the way it's going to work out. I mean, I don't even know when Jerry's Netflix special is coming out, but it's coming. You know what I mean? Like there's just like all this stuff that doesn't matter. And and that's the most depressing thing. And I'm sorry to make this is kind of, I guess, our Cowboys coaching search discussion. Mm-hmm. The most depressing thing about the idea of Brian Schottenheimer is that that's not even the purgatory that we have to survive, which would be the Jason Witten purgatory. This is a level of purgatory before the actual level of purgatory. Like it feels like the most pointless, largest waste of time that you could possibly conceive for us. So yeah, it sucks a lot.
If you like Jason Witten that much, just make him your head coach, right?
Don't do that.
But
we all share that thought, believe me.
Yeah, like it's just like, why? What is this half measure? What is the point of the half measure? Like, what does that serve? You could respect that more. Again, I think that would be a bad decision, but you could respect it more. And this is what we believe. We're going with it, as opposed to like, it seems like there is no real plan. Is it unfair to say that you think they wanted McCarthy back?
I think it's completely fair to say that they assumed he would not stand up for himself. That they assumed that he would take Witten and whatever, and they dragged it out. They liked the attention that it gave them. I mean, and that was my criticism. I know we haven't really podcasted consistently, thank God, this last year. But I mean, my biggest criticism, and Blogging the Boys people have heard me say this, is that they had no singular North Star. Because what annoys me on end is people saying, I don't know, man. I think that they're or soft tanking. No, like they're not even doing that. Like when you soft tank or you tank in general, you're doing everything in one singular direction by delaying the extensions for CD and Dak. If they had not paid Dak, I would totally buy that. I would have disagreed with it, but at least it would be logical to draw that line and say, okay, they're clearly moving on. Like they've made that decision, but they have done everything, the CD deal, the Dak deal, the McCarthy decision, the coaching search in the most ineffective, inefficient way possible. And in the process have compromised the potential to tank or the potential to compete. It's literally the worst possible elements of all plans involved.
They were also buyers at the trade deadline, and they wouldn't play Trey Lance when, like, if you were tanking, you'd play, you wouldn't play Cooper Rush, who, like, what's the point? There's no, you already know what he is. You really try to play Trey Lance and see if there's anything there. So, yeah, I mean, no, that is not the case.
I think that idea of, like, let's put it this way. I understand competing until like the writing is completely on the wall, but also like lacking the foresight of if this, I can see where this Dak is hurt. We're a little too inconsistent to be banking on a playoff run. I don't think a receiver who is fourth string or third string on his rise, he's not really going to move the needle for us. Like Trey Lance, if that was a conversation way earlier than the point in which he started, which was week 18. I think it should have been a much earlier decision. Like Brandon mentioned, it's actually rough and to the point. Like I just think the idea of really banking on like trying to win can jeopardize. Like at one point, y'all were a top 10 draft pick projection. I don't even know where y'all at right now.
They were 3-7 when they lost to Houston on Monday Night Football, and they finished 7-10. It's just, it's astounding levels of incompetence. And this is my final diatribe on it all. I know you wanted to ask each of us a question, but now, and it's just a continual game of like, well, this is how I feel today. Now the idea or the line they're going to sell is, well, we're going to hire Broughton Scheinheimer because we want continuity. We want consistency for Dak Prescott. In a vacuum, that makes sense. I think that's going a little too far in terms of catering to your franchise quarterback, but I totally get, right? Like if in the offseason, Washington was like, well, Jaden Daniels thinks that Bobby Slowick is a good idea, so we're going to bring him in. Okay, cool. Jaden gets whatever he wants, right? Like we all can kind of understand that. But you're going to tell me that you want what Dak wants when the man went on record a few months ago and said, I want Mike McCarthy, and you ignored that. And you've dogged him relative to multiple extensions and made him just kind of your sacrificial lamb for any and all blame or responsibility for the failures the franchise has had. Like now you really care about his wants and his wishes to make Brian Schottenheimer or Kellen Moore, the head coach. I think, Brandon, and I'll turn it over to you with Jamal's question. If the Cowboys hired Kellen Moore to be their head coach, you'd be like, hell yeah, take him back. Like we don't want anything to do with this guy anymore.
What's the question?
If Kellen Moore left for the Cowboys, would you be more excited or upset?
That's a good question, because I think Kellen Moore hasn't done necessarily a great job this year, but I also don't think it's just like all him. And I think Hurts plays a big role in what this offense ultimately looks like. So it's kind of hard to parse that. I would say, I guess, since I have to answer the question, that I think ideally they would not lose him because you would want multiple years of continuity, and because Jalen Hurts hasn't really had that. And I don't think he should be expected to have that because it doesn't really happen anywhere in the NFL along with tenured offensive coordinators like from 2022. Like just you're not getting, that same kind of continuity that you see sometimes on defense. So I would prefer to him to stay, I guess. I mean, that depends, I guess, on who they could potentially get if he isn't Dak. I don't really know. I'm not really, haven't been of that mind. Although Bobby Slowick, who you think you just mentioned, got fired by the Texans. So yeah. There you go.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I lean towards I'd like him back just for the sake of continuity, but not as much as like they have to keep him. He's been so great.
So here's my thing, Brandon. My question, RJ had mentioned, he made a comment about Jalen Hurts. And so correct me if I'm wrong, RJ, but I think you had said that, I mean, you didn't say he was playing good, and you also said that he was the bottom half of the league or bottom half of NFC. I can't remember which one, but bottom half of which.
I didn't think it out loud, but if you want me to, these are the quarterbacks in the NFC I would rank ahead of Hurts. I would put, obviously, Jaden. I would still put Dak, a healthy Dak, although I'm, wavering a bit there, but I'd still put Dak. if we're factoring like contracts and things like that or potential, I suppose I'd take Caleb Williams, certainly Jared Goff, certainly Jordan Love. I think I'd take Michael Penix off, potential. I'm a little bit interested in Bryce Young.
That's a little generous.
I've always loved Kyler Murray more than anybody else. I would take Matthew Stafford, assuming he returns. I don't know how. I think that's.
Why don't you just list the quarterbacks you wouldn't take?
I would not take.
I'm at 9.
If the Giants get Shador, again, some of this is like I will admit that like Caleb, Bryce Young, Shador, even Michael Penix, obviously, they're all in the kind of potential. You're taking a bit of a chance type thing. Okay. Comfortably, I would take Jaden, Dak, Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Baker, Jordan Love.
So he's hovering around like, okay, I got you. All right. So to that point, and why that was something like it dawned on me. I don't know exactly because I've never clearly made it to this point in the season where my team is involved, but the Eagles have unfortunately had the success of doing that, and the privilege of doing that, being conference title contenders, and making the playoffs for a good portion of the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, missed it. One and done last year with Tampa. But if the Eagles go into this game and they ultimately lose the game, but the big storyline is about Jalen Hurts having a bad game. I'm not gonna say terrible. I don't see terrible happening, but he just has a bad game, and it's like undoubtedly a bad game where like it's hard to debate. It's hard to make excuses for him. Mm-hmm. What is the conversation surrounding Jalen? Is this and is there any actions that you can foresee taking, or is this like just a one-off? Like we just got to bounce back next year. Like what do you think is going to happen after such a result like that?
Yeah, my thinking of how that would look like isn't necessarily. I mean, like it's possible he turns the ball over multiple times, but like I don't think it would look like that as likely as much as it would just be like leaving plays on the field. Kind of like this is going to be the kind of the theme of why like the passing game hasn't been great. It hasn't because he can't do anything at all. It's because he's like not taking advantage of opportunities that are there. So I think it would kind of look like that. And I think it would kind of, the conversation is just like, yeah, like he can do some things, you can win with him, obviously at a very high level, but like you're looking for that guy who can be the difference maker. And if you go into a game against someone like Jaden Daniels, who is that difference maker for the Commanders, like, and then you're losing that kind of quarterback advantage of the head-to-head there, and that being the difference in the game. I think there's a long conversation. Now, they're tied to his contract. I don't think they're not moving on, and he's still relatively young. They're not moving on from him at all this offseason, but it'd probably be like, I don't know if maybe they scapegoat Kellen Moore. I don't know. Honestly, probably not, because they probably would try to sell the continuity thing. So I don't think much would change this year, but obviously it puts a lot of pressure on Hurts next year to like the passing game has to be better. It can't be like broken again like it was this year. So yeah, it's weird because for the Eagles to be playing like this, obviously the historical kind of precedent just really isn't there. You're looking at like 2015 Peyton Manning or like the 2013 Legion of Boom kind of even there. It's just and those are over 10 years ago now. Like it's been a long time since we've seen this kind of football really win like this. And Jeffrey Lurie, like historically, has always been like, and on the record is like passing game is what matters most. So it very does not like fit what the owner wants for this team. So I'm really interested to see what that looks like after this season. And I'm guessing there's going to be a big time emphasis on like getting this passing game fixed.
Where are they?
No, I don't have anything. I'm tapped out.
I think yeah, I was about to say, I think that's fair enough. I was just interested because there's like to the point, like I said, to the point that you are reached this point of the season from the Eagles perspective. Like I see a bunch of back and forth surrounding Jalen, just from the fan base. So it's like, a lot of people don't trust him, and there's some people who understand what the mission is, and it's to feed Saquon. But you gotta get something out of that passing game, and it's like, is there going to be some effort to actually make that happen this week, or is it going to be, or can it be a good likelihood that's the reason why you lose? So who knows? But it's worth pondering.
Last one. because we've already picked a game. Presuming your team wins. Actually, if your team wins and if your team loses, I think that's a good way to ask the question. Who do you want to win the AFC? Like, so therefore, like, who do you think is like the maybe answering one answers the other? Because if you're like, I would rather face the Bills, that means you think the Chiefs are a better team, and therefore I'm assuming don't want the other team in your game to win. So this was a very confusing way to ask the question. But
well, I understand. I understand. So I think while I think Washington, if they make it to the Super Bowl, the conversation of Jaden Daniels being a one of one, like that's going to already it's set in stone. Like he's the 1-on-1. He's the only rookie to ever make it to that point. And like I think it's ultimately stamped. It's the greatest rookie season probably by any sport, probably. Like it is what it is. So I think while that exists, if he wins this game and goes to the Super Bowl, I would like to see the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason why I like to see the Kansas City Chiefs is because look, we already playing. I told you we playing with house money.
I can kind of get on board with this. Yeah.
And I would love to see Pat Mahomes and Jaden Daniels go head to head because it's like, am my eyes deceiving me? Like, do I think that he can really battle against some of the top quarterbacks, top teams in the AFC, in the NFC? Like, can he really do it? He already beat Joe Burrow. Granted, that team was not good. Joe Burrow and that offense was good, but that team was not good. But like, you're facing some of these top dogs and you're competing every step of the way. And it's like, you're in the Super Bowl at this point. You just beat a number one seed, a number 2 seed. Again, the seeds, we get that. So like, I would love to see him face off. And honestly, what's the other choice? You got Josh Allen in a strong run game over there who can really tote, and Josh Allen who can really tote himself. Like they got a solid defense. Like there's the choices at this point is limited. You got the 1-2, you got the 1 and the 2. Like what you got?
To add to this point, you could also be the team who stops the three-peat. I guess that's obviously true for the Eagles as well. And unlike the fraud title the Eagles won, where it's the Eagles and Eli Manning that beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. If you're the Commanders and you beat Patrick Mahomes, it's Jaden Daniels and Tom Brady who are the two people. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a really exclusive club to be in. So so then who do you want to win the AFC if the Commanders lose?
Chiefs. I am a fan. I'm a fan of greatness, and I that's why I love the challenge period to go up against the Kansas City Chiefs, win or lose. Like I'm a fan of greatness. It sucks that if Washington did make it and they lose to Kansas City, that it will be at our demise that they win the third straight. But ultimately speaking, I was a fan. It took me a while to come around on the Patriots, but ultimately I was like, you know what, bro? I respect it. Tom, I was actually Brandon. You didn't, of course, you didn't know me then. That was about to be a stupid thing to say. I was rooting for y'all when y'all played the Patriots. Donovan McNabb and T.O. I was like, look, man, I had my pizza downstairs at my friend's house. I'm like, man, F Brady, F the Patriots, let's go. Like I'm like, bro, make them lose. Like I don't want them to see them win. But that was years ago. And then when he came back after that hiatus and they're winning in the 2010s. I'm like, bro, like I can't hate that much longer. Like this dude's a dog. What they're doing in New England is tough. And I have that same respect for what Pat Mahomes is doing. And I had the respect much quicker when I understood how good he was. Like I pull for greatness. I don't hate against it. So it's the Chiefs if we win. It's the Chiefs if we lose.
Yeah, for me, RJ, what have I been saying since the Super Bowl that the Chiefs won against the 49ers? I said they're going to go back and win it. This whole season has felt like just kind of irrelevant, which is like, I'm glad I'm saying this now after the end of this episode, but I've truly felt that way because to me, it's like if you think the Chiefs are going to lose, you're Charlie Brown trying to go kick the football that Lucy is holding. Like, are you kidding me? They're going to she's going to pull it again. How many times do we need to see that?
If you think that someone isn't going to have their heart shattered at the hands of the Chiefs winning, you know, like someone is going to convince themselves that that Lucy's not going to pull it away. You know what I mean? To your point.
In wrestling, I don't know how big of wrestling guys you are. I don't really watch as much anymore, but
not as much. Well, not at all anymore, but still.
But like there was an era of where John Cena, who everyone knows, well, you know, like just would always win. And it was like there was like a meme of it called Cena wins LOL. Because like that's just what always was gonna happen. Of course, John Cena was always gonna win. And that's just what it kind of feels like with the Chiefs. It's like anytime it looks like they're gonna lose, they get this crazy break from the refs or from, you know, just like this demon magic that they've seemingly conjured where, you know, like the block field goal late against the Broncos. It's just like just anytime you think you have them beat, no, you don't. You just don't. So, and I know the Bills beat them in the regular season. I don't care. Like it's totally different. Mahomes always is going to beat Allen in the playoffs. I just think until I see otherwise, I just think the Chiefs are winning the Super Bowl. So I kind of want them. I mean, I don't want the Eagles. If the Eagles go to the Super Bowl, I want them to play the Bills because I think they can actually beat the Bills. I don't think they can beat the Chiefs. I don't think anyone at all can beat the Chiefs. And then if the Eagles lose, then I want the Chiefs to go just to prove that I was right and make me feel validated for believing that since the Mahomes post-game interview against the 49ers from the Super Bowl last year, that they were just going to be locked in three-peat. Like, I think they will.
Well, we'll remember you said this. If it is Chiefs Eagles and you pick the Eagles, like
I'm not going to pick them. I've told you, I'm not moving off the Chiefs unless like Mahomes gets hurt or something, you know, something extreme. The Chiefs are winning.
I do want to say for both of you, because I need to find some way for the Cowboys to annoy you both. Outside of the fact that Jerry Jones is probably going to announce the Brian Schottenheimer thing during this game. But regardless of
Friday news dump.
Regardless of who the Chiefs played, if they do make it to the Super Bowl, if they were to win it, Patrick Mahomes is like the greatest Dallas Cowboys fan of all time. I'm sure you both know he has a DFW tie. His 4 Super Bowls at that point in time would have come twice against the 49ers, and once or twice against the Eagles, and once against the Commanders. He would have directly prohibited 4 titles that would have been very annoying to Dallas Cowboys fans. So,
does this really mean anything to you?
I'm at this level of coping.
He's grasping for straws, Brandon. It's okay. There's nothing that he can do to affect me at this point.
I mean,
it's nothing.
you don't know what it's like here, Brandon. Like I know the Eagles were in the darkness for a very long time, but at the very least they try. It is such a difficult thing to have hope taken from you. That's where I'm at.
Well, on that note, I think we're done.
Also, Interstellar is a pretty good movie. Just in case no one thinks that, I want to be the first to say it.
I'm gonna do for.
I don't know if you remember this, Jamal. We always add a song to our playlist here. So, so give us a song to please add to the NFC East Mixtape official playlist on Apple Music.
Okay. Hit me with the. I remember I did Go-Go last time.
Yes.
I think I did Go-Go last time. This is what am I gonna do? Do I have to go first?
No, RJ, are you? Do you?
I'll go. I'm ready to go. So shout out to my friend Pledge who reminded me of this song's existence. Oh, wait a minute. We already have this on the playlist. Okay. Wow. Shout out to my son. So I have a 3-year-old son, and for Christmas he got. Do either of you know what a toonie is? A toonie box?
No.
It's like a little red box, and it's like a little speaker. And there are little figurines, like there's like, you know, Mickey Mouse and Winnie the Pooh, whatever, and you put them on top and it plays songs relevant to the toonie. And you can do like a voice recording or whatever. So my son loves Spidey and His Amazing Friends, which is really difficult to track if you have seen all the Marvel movies because things get kind of complicated from a storyline.
Yeah, I'm struggling, and I love Marvel, but I'm struggling.
Yeah, so it's a difficult thing. But that being said, I was going to put the song I Don't Care by Fall Out Boy because that kind of exemplifies my disposition to football in general, but we already had it, unfortunately. That being said, Fall Out Boy, or the main singer, actually did the music for Spidey and His Amazing Friends, the show that's available on Disney and Disney+. So I'm going to go with Spin, Spin, Spin from Spidey and His Amazing Friends is my contribution. Shout out to my son.
Great.
Okay. I found the perfect song, man. You know, this is mainly tailored to RJ. But you know, there's this artist. I'm not too familiar with the artist, but I know he's like a like dance hall type of DJ or I think he started as a DJ, but now he's an artist. But his name is Gordo. And I think this is his project. It's called Diamante is the name of the project. But it's a song featuring Drake called Healing. and I think this is probably a perfect opportunity for RJ to, listen to that song and weep or whatever he needs to do, get it out of his system, and listen to it when he's down thinking about the Cowboys. He'll be perfectly fine. So the song is called "Healing" by Gordo and Drake, featuring Drake.
So I feel like I have to change my pick now. I was gonna pick something I'm listening to a lot, but I feel like because you picked Drake, I kind of just need to go in a different direction. I wanted to do Kendrick Lamar, Not Like Us.
Okay.
Is there a reason?
Can't go wrong with that.
I don't know. I'm just gonna pair that.
Is it just to not do Drake? Is that is that like
I don't know.
the reason?
I just felt like it's it's just time.
By the way, Team Kendrick here, but since we're talking about those two.
Thank you for specifying.
For sure.
Okay. Football is really meaningless, and the fact that you guys let it decide your emotions is representative of some poor decisions in your lives. That's really all I have to say. Brandon, do you have anything you want to
add? Find Jamal at Hogs Haven and Trap or Die podcast. RJ Ochoa.
Let Wall Tell It is his specific handle. So
RJ from Blogging the Boys, where I'm sure you can read about why Brian Schottenheimer is the next savior of the franchise. Not from him, but someone
when Jason Witten leads a Cowboys team to success and a win, and when he beats either of your teams at any point, I will laugh. Like when your team loses a game to the Jason Witten led Cowboys, remember this and feel shame.
Great. And then me at bleedinggreennation.com.
Jamal, you are the guest, so you can have the final word. It could be anything you want. So,
well, I want everybody to enjoy the weekend. I want everybody to stay safe. I appreciate RJ and Brandon for inviting me back on. This is always fun just to chop it up with you guys. And the tide has turned over here, and I'm very happy to be back on here and not having to revel in the misery of the Washington Commanders. But at the same time, when Sunday comes around, enjoy it, experience it with your family, friends, whoever you're going to be with. Eagles fans that's listening, Commanders fans, if you are happening out here to listening, make sure you enjoy this experience because it's the first time in 30-some years. But yeah, outside of that, let's have some good football. Let's hope for a good game. And obviously hope the good guys win.